Hi friends, welcome to lesson number 2, Perspectives and Concepts in the Study of Social Stratification and Social Mobility. Introduction. Social stratification takes on new meanings when it is examined from different sociological perspectives, functionalism, conflict perspective and symbolic interactionism. The functionalist perspective states that systems exist in society for good reasons. Conflict theorists observe that stratification promotes inequality, such as between rich business owners and poor workers. Symbolic interactionists examine stratification from a micro-level perspective. They observe how social standing affects people's everyday interactions and how the concept of social class is constructed and maintained through everyday interactions. When we talk about the objectives, after completion of this lesson, you will be able to understand the functional, conflict and symbolic interaction perspectives. You will be able to describe the various concepts in social stratification. You will be explain the concept, types and significance of social mobility. So, let us begin our discussion on functional perspective in the study of social stratification. The functionalist perspective examines the ways in which the parts of society operate. According to functionalism, different aspects of society exist because they serve a vital purpose. Thus, functionalism analyzes what is the function of social stratification. The most famous functionalist theory of stratification was first presented by Kingsley Davis and Wilbert Moore. In 1945, in the book Some Principles of Social Stratification. Stratification exists in every human society and they have explained stratification in functional terms. All social systems share certain functional prerequisites which must be met if the system has to survive and operate efficiently. One such requirement is effective role allocation and performance. For this to happen, all roles must be filled. They should be filled by those best able to perform them and necessary training for them to be undertaken. The roles must be performed conscientiously, that is very carefully. Social stratification is thus a good mechanism for ensuring effective role allocation and performance. People differ in terms of their innate ability and talent. Positions differ in terms of their importance for survival and maintenance of society. Certain positions are more functionally important than others. They require special skills for the effective performance and there is limited number of individuals with necessary ability to acquire such skills. Thus, the major function of stratification is to match the most able people with functionally most important positions. It does this by attaching high rewards to those positions. Desire for rewards motivates to compete. Theoretically, most talented will win. Such positions require long periods of training. The promise of high rewards is necessary to provide an incentive to encourage people to undergo this training and to compensate them for the sacrifice involved. Thus, Davis and Moore conclude that social stratification is a device by which societies ensure that most important positions are filled with extra care by the most qualified persons. The difficulties are which positions are functionally most important. Highly rewarded positions do not necessarily mean it is functionally important. Importance of a position thus can be measured in two ways. Firstly, the degrees to which a position is functionally unique, there being no other positions that can perform the same function satisfactorily. Secondly, the degrees to which other positions are dependent on the one in question. For example, managers are more important than routine staff since latter are dependent on direction and organization from management. Davis and Moore regard social stratification as functional necessity for all societies. They see it as a solution to a problem faced by all social systems, that of placing and motivating individuals in the social structure. When we try to analyze Melvin Tillman's critique of Davis and Moore's theory, certain components emerge. The most famous opponent of Davis and Moore, Melvin Tillman, questions the adequacy of their measurement of functional importance of positions. So, the different points of differences are: Davis and Moore say most highly rewarded positions are indeed the most important, whereas Melvin Tillman says many occupations which afford little prestige or economic reward can be vital to the society. Tillman argues that some labor force of unskilled workmen is as important and indispensable as some labor force of engineers. Tillman argues that Davis and Moore have ignored the influence of power on unequal distribution of rewards. Davis and Moore assume that only a limited number of individuals have the talent to acquire the skills necessary for the functionally important positions. Tillman believes this as a questionable assumption because an effective method of measuring talent and ability has to be devised. Tillman also questions the view that training is required for important positions should be regarded as a sacrifice and therefore need of compensation. Davis and Moore say that the major function of unequal rewards is to motivate talented individuals. Tillman argues that social stratification can and often does the act of a barrier to motivation and recruitment of talent. In caste and race, social stratification is a barrier. Closed social stratification acts quite opposite to Davis and Moore theory. Tillman says that even in open system of stratification, there are barriers to motivation and recruitment of the talent. Let us now discuss about the conflict perspective in the study of social stratification. Conflict theorists are deeply critical of social stratification, asserting that it benefits only some people, not all of society. Stratification, conflict theorists believe, perpetuates inequality. Conflict theorists try to bring awareness to inequalities such as how a rich society can have so many poor members. In this connection, let us try to discuss about Karl Marx's perspective. Marx first used historical materialism as theory to understand social change. However, he also elaborated on the concept of division of labor. Through the development of technology, human beings were able to improve agriculture and could form settled communities. As production grew, the community produced more than its requirements. There was surplus. It was now possible to support people who were not directly involved in the production of the food. Once there was surplus, it was possible for people to diversify their activities. Hence, some produced food which was sufficient to feed all, while others were engaged in other activities. This is called division of labor. This system led in some people gaining control over the means of production or mode of production by excluding others. Thus, property which was held by all came under the control of only some members, giving rise to the notion of private property. Hence, now the interests of all people were no longer common. With regard to class, which is the focal unit of Marx theory, Marx used the term class to refer to two main strata in all stratification systems. There are two major social groups in all stratified societies, a ruling class and a subject class. The ruling class derives its power through its control over the means of production. It is thus able to appropriate the labor of another class. Marx used the term class to refer to the main strata in all stratification systems. Class comprises two major groups, one of which controls the means of production, is able to appropriate the labor of other class due to specific position it occupies in the social economy. Now, what does Marx write about the growth of class? The development of society is through the process of class conflict. The domination of one class over the other leads to conflict. Alongside, the production process also develops due to changes in the technology, resulting in its improvement. This leads to changes in the class structure as classes become obsolete with increase in production techniques. New classes are then formed, replacing the old classes. This leads to further class conflict. Marx believed that the Western societies had developed through four main stages or epochs. Firstly, primitive communism, which is represented by the societies of prehistory. These societies, which are dependent on hunting and gathering and which have no division of labor. From then onwards, all societies are divided into two major classes: masters and slaves in ancient society, landlords and serfs in feudal society, capitalist or bourgeoisie, and labor class, that is proletariat, in capitalist society. During each historical epoch or stage, the labor power required for production was supplied by the subject class, that is by slaves, serfs and labor class respectively. The ruling class exploits and oppresses the subject class. Since the ruling class is economically powerful, they also become legally and politically powerful. Despite the fact that these classes are dependent on one another, the relationship is that of exploiter and exploited. In explaining the basic characteristics of capitalist society, Marx says that capital is defined as the money used to finance the production of commodities for private gain. Capitalism therefore involves the investment of capital in the production of commodities with the aim of maximizing profit. Marx argued that capital as such produces nothing, only labor produces wealth. Yet, the wages paid to the workers are well below the value of goods they produce. The difference between the value of wages and commodities is surplus value, which is used by the capitalists as profits. The political power is derived from the economic power. Therefore, the major institutions, values and belief systems are seen to be largely shaped by economic relations. The power of ruling class therefore stems from its ownership and control of the forces of production. Marx says that class also leads to social change. Proletariats develop into a class for itself, that is, class having class consciousness and class solidarity. The basic contradictions contained in a capitalist economic system would lead to its eventual destruction. Capitalist society in itself is very unstable. Increasing use of machinery will result in a homogeneous working class, since the increased use of machinery shall remove the differences in skilled, semi-skilled and unskilled workers. The differences in wealth between bourgeoisie and proletariat will increase. Even if the real wages and living standards of proletariats may increase, its members will become poor in relation to the bourgeoisie or the capitalists. This process is called as pauperization. Class forms the basis of the stratification system in any society. Classes are related to the production process of each society. Changes in class structure occur when there are changes in the production process. Thus, the system of stratification in a society is dependent on the relations of production. Now, let us try to discuss about symbolic interaction perspective in the study of social stratification. Symbolic interactionism uses everyday interactions of individuals to explain society as a whole. Symbolic interactionism examines stratification from a micro level perspective. This analysis strives to explain how people's social standing affects their everyday interactions. In most communities, people interact primarily with others who share the same social standing. It is precisely because of social stratification that people tend to live, work and associate with others like themselves, people who share their same income level, educational background, class traits and even tastes in food, music and clothing. The built-in system of social stratification groups people together. Let us now understand the different concepts in the study of social stratification, and one of the most important is inequality. According to Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the question of inequality is a basic one in understanding the social stratification. The imposition of society on man created a situation of conflict, inequality, distorted values and misery. Thus, there could be several modes of status determination, including birth, ethnicity, race and other such criteria. A given pattern of stratification would determine the nature and functioning of a society. The German-British sociologist and class conflict theorist Ralph Dahrendorf, while tracing the history of inequality, says that in 18th century, the origin of inequality was the focal point, and in 19th century, the formation of classes was debated, and in 21st century, we are talking of theory of social stratification. He gives two approaches to study inequalities. First, we must distinguish between inequalities of natural capabilities and those of social position. And secondly, we must distinguish between inequalities that do not involve any evaluative rank order and those that do. Based on the combination of both, Dahrendorf refers to four types of inequality in relation to individual. They are, firstly, the natural differences of kind in features, character and interests. Secondly, natural differences of rank in intelligence, talent and strength. Thirdly, social differentiation of positions essentially equal in rank, and fourthly, social differentiation based on reputation and wealth and expressed in a rank order of social status. Dahrendorf observes social inequality lies neither in human nature nor in the historically dubious conception of private property. It lies rather in certain features of all human societies which are necessary for them. Following the Weber's distinction between power and authority, Dahrendorf observes that power and power structures logically precede the structures of social stratification. Thus, the explanation of inequality lies in the power structure. Let us now also talk about purity and impurity. 𝗧𝗦𝗔𝗧 in Homo hierarchicus opines how society is stratified on the basis of purity and impurity. Thus, according to 𝗧𝗦𝗔𝗧, the extreme form of social stratification coexists with occupational stratification, linguistic, sexual and religious stratification. Hierarchy is one form of stratification in which the strata are arranged vertically. Inequality pervades all forms of differences and thus it leads to stratification horizontally also. There can be separate classes of strata and these strata need not be unequal whether there are differences in wealth, power or prestige. For example, in the modern industrial system, the complex division of labor is witnessed. There are a number of positions which seem to be equal but are different from one another. Horizontal stratification no doubt brings in differences but not inequality. Hierarchy is the core of stratification and is used for ordering of social units as superior and inferior or higher and lower. Race and caste are considered as natural hierarchies as both imply an ordering of endogamous groups having an unchanging hereditary membership. Hierarchy as a principle of ranking or ordering signifies for more rigidity compared to terms like stratification, differentiation, class and power. 𝗧𝗦𝗔𝗧 gave the concept of hierarchy while explaining India's caste as a rigid and static system of stratification in his famous work Homo hierarchicus. Caste and class symbolize inequality and hierarchy. These two terms used in social stratification emphasize hierarchy and differences. Let us now try to understand the relationship between social mobility and social stratification. Social mobility is the movement or transition from one social position to another between different levels of social hierarchy. Sorokin defines mobility as a process by which individuals move from one social class to another. Implicit in the concept of mobility is the recognition of a graduation in a society which is done in terms of power, prestige and privileges, that is to say, hierarchical structure in the society. Study of social mobility needs to concern itself with the movements of individuals as well the consequences of these movements for the social groups and the total social structure that encompass these individual moves. Friends, there are two models to explain mobility in society: open model and closed model. When we talk about open model, there are very few obstacles to social mobility and people move from one ranking to another. Positions are awarded on the basis of merit and rank and tied to individual achievement. The status depends on individual efforts. Individuals move up or down the stratification structure as their abilities and efforts permit. There is equal chance to succeed. It is exemplified in an industrial city or urban conglomeration where social mobility is very, very brisk. When we talk about closed model, in closed model, persons born in different castes or classes are ascribed to a particular level. They cannot change or move to any stratum or level because they are bound by customs, tradition, hereditary factors and social pressures of the society. In theory, positions cannot be changed and social hierarchy is fixed, rigid and transmitted from generation to generation. Let us briefly discuss about the types of mobility. Intragenerational mobility. It is defined as the movement of the same person over a period of time. For example, a hairdresser becoming the owner of a chain of saloons. Intergenerational social mobility. It is defined and measured as a social class difference between father and offspring over a period of time. A person moves up or down the social ladder relative to parental class position. For example, son of a bus driver becoming a doctor or an IS officer. Horizontal mobility. It refers to the changes in the position that do not appreciably changes a person's status. Vertical mobility. It refers to the movement of people, of groups from one status to another. It involves changes in class, occupation or power. Vertical mobility can be divided into two: ascending or social climbing or upward mobility, and secondly, descending, social sinking or downward mobility. Ascending currents exist in two principal forms: as an infiltration of the individuals of a lower stratum into an existing higher one, or as a creation of new group by such individuals and the insertion of such group into higher stratum. When we talk about descending mobility or social sinking, even this has two principal forms. Firstly, dropping of an individual from a higher social position into an existing lower one without a degradation or disintegration of the higher group they belong to, and secondly, manifested in the degradation of the entire social group as a whole. T.B. Bottom-Moore in his book Classes in Modern Society points out that social mobility has generally increased with economic development of the industrial societies. This increase has been largely due to changes in the occupational structure, primarily the expansion of white collar and professional jobs and increase of service sector. Friends, let us now summarize this lesson. In this lesson, we have tried to understand the various perspectives in the study of social stratification, which includes functional, conflict and symbolic interactionism. The concepts like social differentiation, hierarchy, purity, impurity are used to study and understand social stratification. Social mobility is of different types, including horizontal, vertical, intergenerational and intragenerational.